Welcome back. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us today book author Ric Merrifield. He authored Rethink, a business manifesto for cutting costs and boosting innovation. Ric, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thanks for having me on the show.
Good, good. Thanks for being with us, Ric. Ric, no doubt we're seeing tough times. Businesses are shutting down, filing for bankruptcy protection at all levels, from small business to obviously large corporations. Help us out here. What's the biggest mistakes that companies are making as they cut costs, and how can they avoid them?
Well, there are a couple of big mistakes I'm seeing. The first one is that people have been in growth mode for so long, practically 20 years, and when you're in growth mode, you're sort of in this just trying to keep up mode with the growth.
Sure.
And a lot of fat and excess and repetition of work grows into your business model, and you tolerate that. Say, yeah, I know we're not as efficient as we could be. We're just trying to keep up with growth, and that's enough.
Sure.
People underestimate just how much fat has grown into their operating models in the last 20 years, and we're finding it's somewhere between 20 to 40% of their operating budget, which is huge. And in approaching that model, we're seeing that using some of the optimization methods that people used in the 20th century, particularly in the 90s, like process, they're not getting the kind of returns they're expecting and they used to get, partly because they sort of already optimized those methods with that work with those methods.
Right.
So using this new lens that I call that getting out of this how trap helps them see where they can cut costs.
So that's a how trap. Now I'm going to get to that in a minute. So companies, what they really need to do, because I agree with you 100%. When you're in this growth mode, you want to grow this department out. You've got that division you want to grow out. You've got budgets over here. You've got budgets over there. I mean, and then before you know it, you're bloated. But life is good, and you really don't notice it. But when it starts getting thin out there and the sales start to drop, what do these companies have to do? They go department to department to try to trim some of that fat out? How's it done?
Well, one of the things that I tell people is that the mindset is that cost-cutting and innovation are mutually exclusive, which is a mistake. Yeah. Some of the biggest opportunities for cost-cutting are in innovation. And there's some examples in the book about, say, ING Direct cut some huge cost out of their model as a bank. Yeah. They don't let people write paper checks. They don't even have the whole department that most retail banks have for processing bad checks doesn't exist, which is a great way to cut costs through a very simple innovation of eliminating the option to write paper checks.
Yeah.
Another simple cost-cutting innovation is the way people check in for flights at the airport. It makes everybody's experience better, and it cut a lot of cost and inefficiency out of the model. So that's a really simple, small step in a process step that's innovative. A lot of people think of innovation and cost-cutting have to happen in these big, dramatic ways, and they can be, and that's great. I mean, obviously Netflix came up with some really innovative ways to cut costs out of the movie rental business, but you can also have the really small tactical ones that can cut costs. And just prioritizing based on what's most valuable to the business is really, to answer your question, had the lens people should use to decide if it's not that valuable to the business, it still needs to be there, but maybe you can outsource it or automate it or do something different with it.
Ric, if it's not saving your money or making your money, it's got to go. All right?
Exactly.
Now, here's the thing, and this almost seems like a no-brainer to me. Over the years, I've been in business, self-employed, 20 years. Small, big, you want to name it, in between. I've had that run those businesses, multiple employees, et cetera. It goes all the way. My approach always was is that you always run a thin ship, meaning you were lean, you were mean, because that made you a better fight machine out there in the competitive world. So good times or bad times, we were always optimized. And I don't know why companies just can't get into that mode. Maybe they'll learn this time around. You tell me.
I don't know. I think that we've seen recessions before in the last 20 years, and it's been more of an arm punch than anything really dramatic.
Yeah.
This one, I think, we're seeing now is much deeper than that. And I think sort of the silver lining is that we have time to reflect and look back into the operating model and say, okay, we're either going to be the same size or maybe retract and be smaller.
Right.
Now we need to say, okay, who is our most valuable customer, and maybe turn our backs on some of the less valuable customers that we've either been chasing after or more expensive or less profitable for us to chase after. And let's really be sure we know what they value in this new mindset and make sure that we're delivering on that and we're in touch with what they value, and when their tastes and needs shift, we shift with them. And a lot of companies, I think, have been sort of in the shotgun mode of spraying their message across to everybody, and they can't do that anymore. And they say, okay, who is our? Is it teenagers or 20-somethings or baby boomers or small business, large business, whoever you're targeting? Be really specific about what your value proposition is to each customer segment, and that's a great opportunity to do that right now.
All right, now the book titled Rethink. What exactly does that mean? I mean, how are they supposed to rethink what they're supposed to be doing right now? Their approach, if you will, to help turn things around in this recession.
Yeah, so the term rethink is really partially to give credit to people who have been working really hard and thinking and using great methods in the past, but getting to this notion that I call the how trap, where we get so attached to how, and we put so many labels on how we do our work, it blocks and masks really some of the opportunities for cost-cutting and innovation. And so the examples that I use, if you're trying to collect business requirements for something and you walk up to somebody sending a fax, and you say, ask them what they're doing, they'll probably look at you kind of funny and say, well, I'm sending a fax.
Right.
And the reality is that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is something like communicating status or confirming an order.
Right.
How they're doing it is with the fax machine. So if I'm collecting business requirements and another method, I say, okay, well, is sending a fax a requirement? And they say, oh, yeah, it's part of my standard business process. I have to do it to be successful.
Sure.
People would write down a business requirement of sending a fax. Whereas when you separate the what you're doing from the how you're doing it, the business requirement is to communicate status or confirm the order, and how it's getting done is with the fax machine. When you disentangle those two, then you can test whether it matters how they're doing it today, and while you're doing it also say, well, how valuable is this step, the communicating status or confirming an order, in whatever the overall process or work that they're doing? Because if it's not that valuable, that's when you can start to say, well, maybe I can automate it or outsource it or force a standard process. But if it is really valuable, it's just a different conversation. And having that conversation is what the book walks you through the simple idea of the what and the how, and then says, attach value, attach performance, and other measures so you can make really smart decisions quickly. It's very fast about how to prioritize where to cut costs, where to innovate, and where to drive revenue.
And the thing about that, though, too, is let's face it, Rick, we're in a digital age, and if you can make that faxing more efficient, maybe do it through an email. Now you've got a digital duplication of it. You store it. You've got less space. It may even be quicker to send it that way. You got confirmation by a return receipt on the other end. A lot of these other things can come into place. So not necessarily if you can't change your how or you need to have your how, you just change how you do it, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's not to belittle. I mean, in some cases, it really matters how you do something.
Right.
But we found that most organizations think that a lot of stuff in their business is really special and unique and deserves these special labels.
Yeah.
Like they think 80% or so of their work is special, and 20% sort of like the payroll stuff that's very commodity and has to be there. And accounts payable and that sort of stuff is very. Sure. We're finding the reality is that only even the most unusual businesses, only about 20% is really special and unique, and 80% is more sort of commodity functions. And if you can say, look, you're wasting all this time and money supporting a specialized process or all these customizations in your software for this not really special process, and the more you can cut that out and put a tighter lens on what really is valuable, that really gets you into differentiation and optimization and allows you to snap to the value proposition that you're delivering to your customer. And it's exciting. We do it every time we go to a customer, and it's transformational, and it's very fast.
All right, so what is the process for a business to start getting into that, changing how they do and how they rethink and how they can figure out what is most valuable to them and what they really need to eliminate?
It's a great question, and it's a little bit alluring to go and shoot after something that's really high value to start.
Right.
But I recommend you take something that's fairly low value, you already know is fairly low value,
sure,
and analyze it sort of in a safe area, because it's a new method, and you're going to probably learn some lessons as you go and make some mistakes. Make mistakes in something that's low value in a control area, so that when you're familiar with it and understand it and how to use it in concert with other methods like process reengineering and Lean and Six Sigma. Then once you've gotten some miles on it, then you point it at something more valuable, so you can have greater predictability through that high-value project. And when there are surprises in that project, you're going to be less likely to blame the surprises on the method than something else.
Rick, where can we get a copy of Rethink today? Favorite bookstores?
You can get anywhere. There's a book website, rethinkbook.com,
awesome,
that has all of the online sellers, but it's at Barnes & Noble and all of just about. I think it's in most of the airports as well.
Wherever the fine books are sold. And I
think that's right.
That's right, Rick. All right, Ric Merrifield is with us today. Name of the book is Rethink, a business manifesto for cutting costs and boosting innovation. Very, very important. Rick, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for your time. Yeah.
You're more than welcome. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.